Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in A Philosophy of Religion by Edgar Sheffield Brightman, published in 1940. We completed our lessons in the Phenomenology of Revelation, so now we're going to take a look at the composite summary of that third layer of Phenomenology by Brightman. We've already examined religion, we've already examined value. Now we look at the composite phenomenology of revelation. And it's the same format we used before, so remember, subjectivity is left, objectivity is right, observation is bottom, and notion of the true is top. We begin with Block 1, our phenomenological starting point. Knowledge of God is acquired through value experience, objective revelation, and the logic of faith. Revelation equals God's conveyance of his purpose through value normative revelations. There is a moment of negation. In Block 2, the self must negate dogmatic fundamentalism and static holy otherness of revelation. Revelation must make possible the response of the experimental method of reason, which is experimental positing and interpretive construction for Brightman. Knowledge of God proceeds through the dialectic of reason. That takes us on to Block 3. The logic of faith is that which takes up the loyalty to the ideals of the kingdom. This necessitates the stage of evaluation through thought and dialogue with others. Our supposed value claims of faith must be refined as positive theory and then related to the fact of experience for verification, says Brightman. That takes us up to the De Kunta threshold, Aristotle's realm of dialogue, the De Kunta threshold. The logic of faith is defined as a triad that needs refinement through dialogue, as follows. This is basically Brightman's methodology. You have 1, the Aristotelian moment of experimental positing, B, the verification moment of going out of the self in phronesis and praxis, and the third moment as the Hegelian moment of the interpretive construction. Therefore, the De Kunta threshold is equated with heuristic method of trial and error for Brightman. But from this work, we want to elevate supposed value claims to notions of the true. So let's go take a look at Block 5 in the top left, the higher notion of the true. Forming the coherent metaphysic of value requires the following from the De Kunta threshold. We must identify the axiogenetic tendencies in reality that ask for participation, strengthen intentionality to actualize these tendencies as real, and then the raising of natural occurrence to soteriological event. We raise up natural occurrence to soteriological event. Then we form an experimental model of coherence, and we align that with the unseen conscious will in reality. So that is critical for Brightman. We have to be able to identify those axiogenetic tendencies. That's the objective revelation, the axiogenetic tendencies. That is that which we respond to in our logic of faith, the objective axiogenetic tendencies present in reality. That moves on to Block 6, because our logic of faith as experimental positing must pass through the filter of perceived teleosis facts of the purpose within reality. These axiogenetic tendencies point to an overall purpose, an overall teleosis. Logic of faith needs to become concrete. We choose to participate in the energia of the rational mind in reality. In this way, Brightman says axiogenesis transitions to axiosoteria, and the possibility of redeeming creation through actualizing value of the kingdom becomes axiosoteria, redemption, salvation for all creation. So now that we're up here on the higher level of the notion of the true, that notion must become a movement out of the abstract into the concrete. That takes us to block 7. Verification through praxis comes up against the intrinsic and the instrumental evil that is present. Living religion must become practical and redemptive. The logic of faith becomes the concrete dialectic of desire. We just had that in the last lesson. The logic of faith becomes the concrete dialectic of desire, with the desire for the ideals of the kingdom, perceived as transcendent. God himself becomes the object of exploration of faith. The need arises for worthful cooperation with others and a sense of oughtness or moral obligation for the kingdom is taken up. That brings us to block 8 and that movement from the what is to the what ought be. Our logic of faith becomes Hegel's guile of reason, says Brightman. We pass through 3 negations in order to answer the theodicy question. We negate agnostic humanism. We negate theistic absolutism. We negate theistic finitism. We have to continue through our dialectic of value claim, true value, posited real value, and realized actual value. We take those value claims to the de Kunta threshold. Through dialogue, we elevate them to true value. We then posit that value model, and we seek through phronesis and praxis to realize actual value. So it gives us a good composite of the third level of phenomenology for Brightman. But just as a refresher here, let's look at the very center block, block 4, the de Kunta threshold, because it really does define what Brightman means by the logic of faith. The logic of faith is that which takes place right there in block 4. It's a triad. It's a triad consisting of taking up Aristotle and Hegel both. There's the logic of faith consists of the Aristotelian moment of experimental positing of our notion of the true, our picture of the kingdom. Has to be verified through phronesis and praxis, and then in the return moment we enter into the Hegelian moment of interpretive construction, of truly working out a coalescence of values in a coherent metaphysic of value. That's what Brightman calls it. We want to form a coherent metaphysic of value. That's up there in block 5. We seek to form a coherent metaphysic of value through the threefold logic of faith that basically defines the response to revelation. So the best way to understand faith with regard to Edgar Sheffield Brightman is to understand that he is America's version of Aristotle and Hegel, and faith is experimental positing of the notion of the true and interpretive construction in the return moment in order to form a coalescence which he labels the coherent metaphysic of divine value, or coherent metaphysic of value of kingdom. So he gives us tremendous teaching. It took in about 100 pages. It took in 172 to 276. And it really did put together this third level of phenomenology. So now we've had a summary look at religion, the first layer of phenomenology, a summary look at value, the second layer of phenomenology, and now revelation. From here we move into the second half of the manuscript, which is Christian apologetics in answering the theodicy question. It's going to be entirely dedicated to the theodicy question, the theodicy problem. But at this point we should have a good grasp on all 3 levels of phenomenology for Brightman. And we're going to pick up next time on page 277.